Hey all, welcome back to Fuzzy Dirty Gaming, and a quick new video on the channel just showcasing the build that I'm working on at the moment, because a lot of people asked about some footage in a previous Atlas video. I'm not asking for POBs, so I thought I'd just bring a very quick video out. Now this isn't a build guide because I've kind of built this for fun, winging it if I'm honest. I will link two versions down below that are really good, one mega expensive, one affordable. That's not to say this build doesn't work, it does everything I want it to do, but there's probably better ways to build it to fit in more defenses, more damage, make it cheaper. I just kind of built it the way I wanted to build the character. So what we're going to go through in the video is sort of content that the character's done, gem links, skills, items, all the normal stuff, but we're just going to go through it fairly quickly and explain the mechanics on the skill and why it does so much damage, rather than a full build guide, because I honestly don't think this has been built particularly well, but I just wanted to showcase what I've been up to in the last few days. So the skill we're building around, which I'm sure you've seen lots of videos on, is Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation. This gem combined with Sniper's Mark is pretty broken. I can't see a way both these combos survive next league, because you don't actually need much gear to be able to melt Uber bosses. So we'll go through the gem links in a bit. We'll just firstly explain the interactions that make it do so much single target damage when you position correctly. As a skill on its own, it probably does about 700k damage per projectile. So for clearing, it's good enough. Where it comes into its own is you can stack hundreds of projectiles onto the same target if you position correctly and abuse a few mechanics. So with the gem itself, the first important thing is this has 250% of spell damage applies to attack damage. So spell damage is really, really valuable for this build. I've got it 320 because I'm running an Ashes of the Stars, but even the 250, just any increased spell damage you can get adds a ton to the build. The line that's really important is each time that the projectile changes direction, and it changes direction twice normally, a secondary projectile breaks off, flying in the direction it changed from, and multiple of these can hit the same target. Where this comes into its own is Sniper's Mark, because Sniper's Mark splits projectiles, and you can get lots and lots of projectiles in the same attack. When you get it split, you can essentially hit the enemy with every single projectile if you position correctly. Because of this, you want a level 21 Sniper's Mark, because that increases projectile splits from 4 to 5. The quality I get from Ashes of the Stars also gives me a lot of increased damage from the projectile hits. Along with that, you either need Nimbus or returning projectiles. So as you can see in a lot of the footage at the beginning, the Maven Blob is a really good example because it's easier to position because he's got big hitboxes. If you stand in the middle of where the enemy is and then you just hold attack, you are going to see an absolute stream of projectiles go all over the screen, which definitely affects performance at times, but it just means that you absolutely melt bosses that don't move. So the takeaway from this is number of projectiles, number of times a projectile can fork, and then Sniper's Mark as big a level as you can get, and then as much spell damage you can get to make that damage work. This all comes together with returning projectiles to just make your damage absolutely insane. What that does mean, though, is without that interaction, the skill is just a normal skill in essence. So to clear, you do need some investment in damage, or you are going to be struggling if you just want to use this skill. There's two videos linked in the description. The one from Big Ducks is a more budget version than this, and it combines two different skills so that you have a clear ability and a single target ability. And looking at the video and the footage, it does pretty much everything you would want a build to do. It looks really, really well built. And then the other link is to Palstron's video, which is a strength stacker, but it uses Nimbus, Headhunter, two very expensive awakened gems, a ring that is the most expensive item in the game. So you're probably talking 1200 divines minimum to recreate his build. It may even be more than that. I haven't checked recently. But if you did want something to aspire to, and you're someone that does earn that sort of currency, that's something you can go for. I'm realistically not going to earn 1200 divines in a league. I don't play often enough. So I've tried to go for a middle ground, and I think it's worked pretty well. But there are obviously bits that I've had to give up from a 1200 divine build, but I do think overall I've come up with an okay build. So let's go with all the gear pieces and why I've selected them. Now there's lots of different options for this skill. You can go Thunder Fist and you can slot it in there and not bother 6-linking it. That's kind of the budget way to do it. It works really well. There's lots of uniques you can get that have specific interactions. There's a unique shield. The Rathpith Globe gives you a ton of spell damage. There's some amulets that can give you an absolute shed load of defenses or offense. Lots of different things you can do. This build for me has had two iterations. The first one, I went pretty defensive. It probably had about a quarter of the damage it's got now. Still enough for Ubers, but it didn't quite have the clear damage it could survive, but if it got overwhelmed with just using this skill, you don't clear an insane amount of packs if you're just going for a kind of a hybrid setup. So this is my final iteration of the build. There's lots of additions I still want to make to it, which I'll go through, but this is kind of where the build's sitting at the moment. So I've gone with Ashes of the Stars, mainly because the quality from Kinetic Bolt is insane. It's this spell damage added as attack damage. You get an extra 70% from running Ashes of the Stars, which is pretty nuts. So that's why I've gone with that. It's about 18 to 20% more damage. Now, originally, when I was running a more defensive setup and I had a lightning coil chest, I was running Defiance of Destiny. The amulet is insane if you've got a fairly decently defensive build. If, however, you're susceptible mainly to one-shots, this amulet doesn't really do anything. So we dumped that because we've also changed the chest. So let's start going through the gear pieces bit by bit that I've gone for. The wand, if you're not going for a chaos damage version, is going to be pretty standard, I think, for anyone using this skill. And it's going to be big lightning damage, attack speed, crit chance, spell damage, and Ellie pen. This probably cost about 18 to 20 divines to craft. They are about 35 to 40 to buy. There's lots of videos on YouTube for crafting this sort of wand. The helmet, I've gone for my standard attack helmet. I wanted to reduce mana cost of skills because I don't want to have to run life tap. And this helmet is pretty important to get that mana cost down. I needed some mana reservation efficiency as well. And just life and resistances are nice to have. So I've got pretty solid helmet, I think, for this build. The shield, I want to be ailment immune. So I've got ailment immunity on this, some resistances, life, and then lots and lots of spell damage because of the quality on the skill gem. I'm using Nimbus to return the projectiles rather than returning projectile support. And then the second ring just caps off all my attributes because I was struggling with strength and intelligence, gives me my remaining resistances, and then it allows me to get non-channeling skills onto it to basically bring my mana cost down to 8. The body armor, going Replica Hero's Eye, going full damage for this build. It is defensive, it gives you big evasion and big spell suppression, gives some intelligence that are desperately needed, and huge attack damage with wand attacks. As mentioned, we're going Ashes of the Stars, so the big boost it gives to quality of the active skill gem. It also gives quality to things like Sniper's Mark, which is really good because it just does more increased damage. The gloves, I've got just a rare pair again, spell suppression, attack speed, life. I've also gone for a small effective increase in marks. I'll explain why later. It basically just made a part of the build quite a lot cheaper. I've just realized I went into a Maven showcase that I've highlighted at the beginning of the video with totally the wrong belt on. This is not the right belt for the build. This is the belt for the build. Onto the belt. Darkness Enthroned, as big an increase effect as you can get. And then here is where you ideally want to stack damage, but you also may need to get things like resistances, attributes, and things like that. Because if you're not running Purity of Elements, resistances are going to be a struggle. So I've got one that satisfies my resistances along with attack speed and damage. And then another one to satisfy Corrupted Blood, more damage and more attack speed. The boots, just got a normal pair of Ralakesh, not even a well-rolled one. This is just so I don't have to worry about how I'm going to generate Frenzy, Power, and Endurance charges. And then for my Tincture, I've gone for Rage on hit on a unique enemy and Onslaught on Killing Blow. The Rage for most builds is not very good. It's just one Rage every time you hit, but there's no cooldown on this thing. And as I said, we can hit with hundreds of projectiles per second. So as soon as you start engaging with a unique enemy, you can hit Berserk and your Rage will go straight up to 50 and will stay there. It may phase off after like 9, 10, 11 seconds, but whoever you're fighting is going to be dead by then, even if it's an Uber boss. I'm not sure the prefix or the implicit for Culling Strike is great. Something like all damage can freeze might be better, but I'm only getting, even with the huge damage you're doing, 14 to 15% shock, probably because it's lots of little hits combined. So I'm not sure all damage can freeze would do that much because I'm not sure we'd have the raw damage to do it. And they're also super, super expensive. I've gone for Jade Flask, Diamond Flask, Quicksilver Flask, and then a Life Flask. Unique Flask would be really good on this. I haven't fit it in yet because my crit is very low, so is my evasion, and my attack speed is not brilliant. But you can fit a Dying Sun into this, put it next to your Tincture, get some Flask effect on the tree, and you can end up with 3 projectiles. And also because of your Tincture effects, every time you hit an enemy, you regen Flask charges. So when you're mapping, you can keep Dying Sun up 100% at a time, and that's 3 extra projectiles, which is huge. So we'll go through the links. The reason for the empty sockets is because I'm a 1-skill build, I don't really have any defenses that are worthy of a guard skill. So I've gone with the empty glove sockets to get myself 25% increased life, and I've gone with the empty boot sockets to give me 30% movement speed. If you're struggling for resistances, you can forgo the movement speed, move these gems into here, and then you get 50% resistances. So there are loads of ways to solve resistances on the build because this really doesn't need a lot of gems in the build. In the wand, and this is really important, Sniper's Mark, some way or another, whether it's from plus levels or an actual 21 gem, you need it to be 21 because it splits towards one additional target. It may sound small, but when you're then stacking loads of projectiles up, that makes a big difference to single target and your clear speed. Now, because we want to maintain the effect of it, we're not running mark on hit, and we want to use it really often, so we're spell slinging. What this means is I think it's something like, every 0.6 seconds, you're going to hit this mark on an enemy. Then whatever you hit that enemy with, all the projectiles are going to go all over the place, and it's just really, really good for clear and single target. And then I've got an Enlightened Support. Now, I don't need it, to be fair. My mana is okay. I've just got it in there just as a safety net, really. I have a Precision, which I can't really push up anymore because of mana, but obviously 20 would be nice. Grace, which goes up to 21 because of Ashes to the Stars. And then we have Wrath, level 22, because this is 21. And then Enlighten again to bring the mana cost manageable. So for the 6 link, it depends whether I'm bossing or mapping. When I'm bossing, I'm using Fork and GMP because I think that's the most projectiles you can get. So GMP naturally gives more projectiles. And what Fork does with this gem is Fork adds another change of direction. And every time it changes direction, it fires off all the secondary projectiles. So I think, even though it won't say it on your sheet DPS, I think this is probably the best single target gem. Awakened Fork would be what you want in here, but I think it's something like 70 or 80 divine. So that's one of the items I'm working towards. When I'm mapping, I don't really feel like I need the projectiles. So what I'm doing is sticking in chain. So we just got Fork and chain, just to make sure that when we fire our projectiles out, they are clearing most of the screen, and it's working really well, even in fairly juiced mapping. These, once I get to Awakened, it'll be even better. I need to really play around with whether you should maybe have GMP instead of Fork for mapping. I don't know. I'm still learning this skill. This is kind of the mapping setup I've gone. So it's chain and Fork. If it's single target, it is GMP and Fork. So the other links, you got obviously the main skill gem. Got volatility support for lightning skills. It's just a really, really good gem. It gives you much more to your maximum attack damage, but less to your minimum. But lightning has a really low minimum anyway, and pushing that higher just gives you really big spikes of damage. If it was something where I was doing big individual hits, it would really add to the shock that I get on the enemy. Awakened added lightning damage. Again, just tons more lightning damage. I did play around with Trinity, but Awakened added lightning actually ended up being more damage, even when the Trinity was active. And then lastly, just to help with mana cost, gone Inspiration, because this gives you reduced mana cost, and the quality now gives you reduced mana cost of skill. So it works even better than it did last league. And then just in the shield, I have Berserk, and then I have Flame Dash linked with faster casting. I was using shield charge, but I really hate it as a movement skill. If you accidentally aim on a tiny bit of scenery, you just don't go anywhere, and it's got me killed a couple of times, so I've dropped it. In terms of the skill tree, my Lethal Pride is a bit scuffed. The idea of this build, and still is to farm juiced T16 lead mechanic stuff. So my Lethal Pride is built purely for defenses, and it has 5% fizz taken as fire and 40% reduced damage from crit. And then I would allocate this 30% reduced damage here. So we're basically hardly taking any damage from critical strikes. However, I'm not really there yet, so this Lethal Pride could be much better. I've gone with a cluster jewel only because I wanted access to 2 easy jewel sockets, because I want to get Ancestral Vision in to get Ailment Immune, and I want to get a Watcher's Eye in to get some pen while affected by Wrath. The best jewel that I found, and there was only one on the market with this particular combo, was Martial Prowess, Opportunistic Fusillade, and then the back one, Storm's Hand, because I don't want to take it, and this seemed to be the only combo available that had these two at the front. So Martial Prowess is really good for me. Attack speed is good. I do struggle slightly with accuracy and its increased attack damage. And then Opportunistic Fusillade, 50% crit chance and 35% damage is very, very good. And then here we've got Ancestral Vision so that I can cap my Ailment Immunity. And then a Watcher's Eye with 15% penetration when affected by Wrath, and we are running Wrath. This gem probably needs upgrading. This is one I got at the very beginning for about a divine. Essentially, I wanted effective marks, and this goes back to the gloves. The reason I've got a little bit of mark effect on gloves is if you want to perfectly roll one of these, which is what you need to get your 100% mark effect, they're very expensive with anything else on it. I wanted phasing, and I wanted some chaos resistance. So this fit the bill really nicely. I think you would maybe pay 6 or 7 times what I paid for this if that effective marks was 25%. The reason it's really important is if you hit 100% effectiveness, it basically doubles what the mark does. So instead of splitting towards 5 additional targets and spitting out loads of extra arrows, it does 10. So you're basically doubling the projectiles by getting 100% effective marks, and the other 75 comes from focal point. And then that's it for the jewels, really. In terms of the tree, it's quite scuffed, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. So we'll run through the tree. I've just changed these nodes. This was me testing out Headhunter, and I needed some extra resistances, so I had to take those 2 nodes. So we'll go through the tree from top to bottom. We're taking most of the wand wheel. It just gives loads of critical strike chance, critical strike multi, attack speed, loads of good stuff, and it allows us to fire an additional projectile. I'm going down here to get this increased spell damage purely because I've got 320% of spell damage applies to attack damage. It's a no-brainer to take these here. It's massive points. We're taking a couple of life nodes here, coming down here and getting the lightning pen and increased attack damage, mana and reservation, which is needed, power charge, frenzy charge, and obviously the jewel socket, the usual life and instant leech, Ellie damage with the mastery that inverts resistances, evasion and life, mana reservation, efficiency. Now this is the part here that's a little bit scuffed. I would never normally take these nodes, but surprise, surprise, there's resistances on there that I need, so I've had to go there. 5% fizz taken as fire is also quite nice. Now these do give something. They give me a bit of block and some attack speed, and this gives me movement speed, attack damage, and crit chance. So they're decent nodes, but you wouldn't normally take these, but they would just need it for me to show up the build a little bit. We're taking crit with reduced damage from critical strike. So with my lethal pride, that's 70% reduced damage. Taking the accuracy along with either dex or the accuracy rating and level just to cap my accuracy at 100%. We're taking the crit projectile wheel there, life wheel along with increased maximum life. And then I don't have any projectile speed on the build, and I feel like it needs it when I've played without it. So I've just taken these 3 nodes here. And then long shot is also decent because our projectiles are traveling quite a long way, because even on single target, they're going out and returning. So onto the Ascendancy, we've gone far shot, endless munitions, gathering winds, and then focal point. Chain would obviously be nice, but I feel like far shot is really good. You can't really give up gathering winds, and we need focal point to maximize that single target damage. So chain ends up being the one that's left out. And then that's really kind of it for the build. It is pretty glass cannon because the only defenses I have 3 endurance charges from Ralakesh's. I have Berserk up on bosses, so that gives you some reduced damage taken as well. Got cap spell suppression, armor immunity, and probably about 85% chance to evade with flask up. So it's not glass cannon, but it's certainly not what I would call a defensive build, but it kills stuff really quickly. I keep losing my XP because I keep doing uber bosses that I'm rubbish at and I can't do any of the phases. In maps, I'm not really dying. I could comfortably level up to 96 and 97. I think past that in juice maps, it might be a bit of a push because I am going to take the odd death. If you wanted to build this more of a budget, it is certainly possible. You would swap Nimbus out for returning projectiles. The wand is really the only sticking point because you need a decent wand, and there's not really a way to get these very cheap. So I think no matter what way you do this build, you're probably spending 30 to 40 divines on it. Ashes is pretty cheap, and it just gives so much extra damage. There's loads of different ways you can build it though. So I recommend if you want to start on a more budget version, check out Big Duck's video linked in the video description. It talks you to build really well, and it gives you lots of options for, I think, the most budget you can probably do this build. So I think that's it for the video. We'll just very quickly, because I haven't done anything live and I want to make sure there's no shenanigans going on. We'll just see if we've got some Shaper fragments, and then we'll just go and quickly do the first phase of Shaper. So we're just going to go in. And then, yeah, that's Shaper dead. So while we're in this fight, actually, it's a good example of the difference of single target when you're standing on top of something. Like, look how long it's taken to get these things down because they're only getting hit by a couple of projectiles. Whereas when you stand on top of something, you don't even see the health bar because the projectiles just stack in pretty unethical amounts. So like I say, this build is probably gone next league, which is why I thought I'd give it a go. I often leave these builds by the wayside with the opinion that, well, it's not viable next league. I don't want to waste my time learning something I'm never going to use again. But I thought, you know what? Let's use one of these stupid skills while we have the chance. So I don't think there's much more to go through on the video. I've kind of covered everything off that I wanted to cover. I've gone through options in the video description if you did want to build the character different to how I've done it, because like I say, it's just how I wanted to build the character and have some fun, and it's probably nowhere near as optimal as it could be, but it works, and I was swimming in currency, so that's kind of all I care about. So we'll get our Watcher's Eye, told you, and then we will close out the video. Obviously, we're going to ID this. I never sell unidentified Watcher's Eye just because of FOMO, so let's hope and pray. That's probably about as bad as you could get. Oh well, live and learn. So that's it for the video. Any questions, feel free to leave them in the video description. Please don't hammer the build. Like I said, I've just done it on a whim and kind of winged most of it. I know it's not optimal, which is why I'm linking a couple of videos in the description. I'm going to carry on pumping money into this though, because I'm enjoying it. Get those awakened gems and then just see where we go from there. Who knows, if I really love it, I may go on to Palstron's strength stacking version, but that is going to require me to really, really, really like this build. And I'm not sure my computer loves it as much as me. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.